It's about jobs, training and studying. The EU Commission recently gave young people hope for new negotiations with Great Britain. The British government, however, has other plans, because the British government has rejected a deal that would make it easier for young Brits to live, study and work in the EU. We are not introducing an EU-wide youth mobility program, explained a government spokesman in London. Freedom of movement within the EU has ended and there are no plans to introduce this, he said, referring to Great Britain's exit from the EU. Of course, for British it has ended in the EU, not in the EU itself. The EU Commission initially proposed a corresponding agreement to the ministers of the EU member states in the Council, with the aim of making it easier for young people from the EU and Great Britain to study and work in each other's places in the future. They wanted to hold long-term negotiations with the government in London, and since Brexit, EU citizens need a visa to stay in Great Britain again, and young Brits also need a visa to stay in the EU. Young EU citizens and British citizens were supposed to be able to study, work and live more easily in the United Kingdom and the European Union. And the EU Commission has therefore proposed to the ministers of the EU member states in the Council to start negotiations with the United Kingdom on an agreement to facilitate youth mobility. The United Kingdom's withdrawal from the European Union has been particularly hard on young people in the EU and the UK who are keen to study, work and live abroad. That was said by Maroš Šefčovič, Executive Vice President for the European Green Deal, Interinstitutional Relations and Foresight. Today we take the first step towards an ambitious but realistic agreement between the EU and the UK to remedy this. Our goal is to build bridges again between young Europeans on both sides of the English Channel. The United Kingdom's withdrawal from the European Union led to a reduction in mobility between the EU and the United Kingdoms. Young people in particular have fewer opportunities to gain life experiences across the English Channel and to take part in exchanges in the areas of youth, culture, education, research and training. And the proposal aimed to innovatively address the current biggest barriers to young people's mobility and provide young people with the right to travel from the EU to the UK and vice versa more easily and for longer periods of time. And the proposal set out the conditions with age, maximum length of stay, conditions for participation in the mobility scheme, and rules for verifying compliance that would have had to be met in order for young people for study, training or work to continue their stay without earmarks and quotas and everything like that. The Commission's recommendations was then discussed in the Council. And after the Council agreed, the Commission wanted to open negotiations with the UK on the youth mobility. The Commission's proposal for this EU-UK agreement on youth mobility was supported by a parallel discussion on the possible participation of the UK in the Erasmus Plus program, which is off the table now too. The European Commission remained open and was willing to negotiate any future requests from the UK to participate in Erasmus Plus or other relevant EU programs open to third countries, for example, Creative Europe. The conditions for the UK's participation in EU programs such as Erasmus Plus are set out in Part 5 of the Trade and Cooperation Agreement, the TCA. Since the withdrawal of the United Kingdom from the EU, the mobility of natural persons between the European Union and the United Kingdom has been subject to the respective immigration regulations of the EU and their member states and the United Kingdom. And this has indeed resulted in fewer people taking up mobility options between the EU and the UK. And according to the EU proposal that was now rejected, young people between the ages of 18 and 30 should be allowed to stay in the destination country for 4 years in the future without a visa being linked to a permanent employment contract. But as I said, Great Britain has now rejected the proposal. Instead, the United Kingdom would be open to agreements with individual EU member states. That was said by a government spokesman. They would already have corresponding agreements with several countries. One of the central tenets of European Union membership was freedom of movement, and this meant that young citizens could effortlessly live, work, or study in any other member state like everybody else could. And Brexit, the UK's departure from the EU, significantly impacted this freedom not only for young people but especially for them, introducing hurdles that previously didn't exist. Pre-Brexit, EU youth could freely find work in the UK, allowing them to gain experience, develop new skills, and build international networks. Now, they face a complex visa system with limitations on job types and potentially lower salary caps. And this can restrict career options and stifle the adaptability that's crucial for young professionals in today's globalized job market. Imagine a young Spanish programmer who excelled at a London tech startup pre-Brexit. Now their ability to stay on and climb the career ladder is limited by visa restrictions. Studying abroad at a UK university was a popular choice for EU students, fostering cultural exchange and knowledge sharing. However, Brexit has made this path more challenging. EU students now face higher tuition fees, a tangle of additional paperwork, and potentially visa applications. That's significant barriers, especially for those from less privileged backgrounds. And this could disproportionately affect students from Eastern Europe who might have previously benefited from scholarships or cheaper living costs in the UK compared to their home countries. Perhaps the most direct impact is on general movement. Traveling and living in the UK for extended periods is no longer an automatic right for EU youth. They are now subject to standard visitor visa restrictions, typically limiting stays to 6 months, and this makes it much more difficult for young people to experience different cultures or develop those international friendships or participate in long-term projects or internships across the former free movement zone. Imagine a young French artist who thrived during a year-long residency program in London. Such enriching experiences become significantly more complicated post-Brexit. And talks about creating a specific youth mobility scheme to recapture some of this loss of freedom did occur. However, the UK government ultimately rejected an EU-wide agreement. And while the UK has established individual agreements with some countries, these are far more limited than the unrestricted movement young people from the EU previously enjoyed. And this lack of open exchange can stifle personal growth, career opportunities, and international collaboration for young people on both sides of the English Channel. The repercussions of Brexit extend beyond just navigating bureaucratic hurdles. The freedom of movement fostered a sense of being part of a broader European community. Young people could easily build connections, share ideas, and collaborate across borders. In its absence, there's a concern that these opportunities for personal and professional development may be significantly diminished. Imagine a network of young researchers from across the EU who could previously collaborate seamlessly on specific projects. Brexit now hinders this type of cross-border innovation and leaves out the British young sciences, researchers, not sciences. And that is something I really don't want to imagine how it feels for the especially younger people in the UK. But if you want to know more, the next video is right here in the end screen. I'll see you there. I'll be back.